It was supposed to be a day like any other. The world's attention was focused on a major global summit. One of those events that leaders and citizens alike watched closely because it promised important decisions about trade, climate, and international cooperation. Millions of people were glued to screens, hoping to see leaders shaking hands, speaking about the future, offering glimpses of hope in an often chaotic world. Everyone expected speeches, announcements, and perhaps a few disagreements, but nothing that could shake the very foundations of life on Earth. The morning had begun quietly, with diplomats arriving in their black cars, security personnel checking every detail, and reporters setting up cameras that would broadcast live to every corner of the globe. There was a sense of routine. People in offices, schools, and homes were scrolling through updates, reading about which countries had agreed on new measures, and noting the expressions on leaders' faces as they entered the conference hall. Nobody could have imagined what was about to happen. Then, it started. It was subtle at first, a shimmer in the sky, almost like sunlight reflecting off a window, but moving in a way that no ordinary plane could. At first, some people laughed or dismissed it as a trick of light, a drone or a helicopter, but then cameras caught it. It appeared to hover silently above the city. News anchors struggled to describe it, calling it unusual, unprecedented, and unexplainable. Security teams scrambled, but their radars showed nothing familiar. Inside the summit hall, the world's most powerful person was preparing for a speech. Staff were arranging papers, aides were whispering last-minute instructions, and journalists were checking their cameras. Then, without warning, the unimaginable happened. A bright flash, more intense than sunlight, lit up the room. People screamed, some ducked under tables, others froze in disbelief. When the light faded, the leader lay motionless. There was no sound of gunfire, no blast, no explosion. Just a silence so profound it made everyone's heart stop. Panic spread quickly. Security rushed in, medical teams tried to respond, and aides shouted instructions that no one could follow. Television broadcasts captured every moment. Faces went pale, mouths opened in shock, and reporters struggled to describe what had just happened. Governments were immediately alerted, and within minutes, the news broke around the world. The leader of the free world had been killed. And no one knew by whom or how. Initially, the first reactions were disbelief. Was it a terrorist attack? Some governments released statements blaming unknown assailants, suggesting extreme measures. People turned to social media, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Videos and pictures were shared millions of times in the first hour. Some claimed it was a technical failure or an accident. But as experts analyzed the footage, it became clear that what had happened did not match any known human technology. The strike was precise, silent, and instantaneous. There was no projectile, no weapon, no explosion in the usual sense. Across the world, citizens reacted in ways that reflected their humanity. Families clutched each other, children asked questions no one could answer, and communities gathered in town halls, religious centers, and public squares, searching for guidance. Fear mixed with anger. People wanted answers, someone to blame, someone to protect them. Panic began to ripple through cities. Flights were delayed, government offices closed, and emergency alerts buzzed on phones. There was a collective realization. This was not something ordinary humans had done. This was something else entirely. Scientists, military officials, and intelligence agencies began working frantically to understand the event. Satellites were checked, radar logs examined, and atmospheric readings analyzed. Nothing matched any known earthly signature. Energy readings suggested a force beyond anything humanity had created. Experts discussed the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement in private, hesitant to speak publicly until proof could be verified. Meanwhile, the public's curiosity and fear grew uncontrollably. Fueled by unverified footage and speculative news, in homes around the world, people watched in stunned silence as analysts debated theories. Some spoke of advanced drones, secret weapons, or chemical attacks. Others whispered ideas that seemed impossible about visitors from beyond Earth, something humanity had only dreamed about in fiction. The reality was far stranger than fiction. The world's reaction was instantaneous. Stock markets crashed, fearing instability and chaos. Governments scrambled to secure their leaders and critical infrastructure. Emergency meetings were held in secret. Communication networks were overloaded with calls, messages, and emails as people sought reassurance. In the streets, citizens reacted differently. Some panicked and tried to leave major cities. Others gathered to protest, to demand action, or to pray. Social media became a battleground for information and misinformation. Inside the affected country, the loss of leadership left a vacuum. Cabinet members, vice presidents, and deputies struggled to take control while emergency protocols kicked in. Military units were placed on high alert. Intelligence services worked round the clock, intercepting communications and monitoring unusual activity around the globe. But no human actor could be found responsible. Every possibility was considered and eliminated one by one. The conclusion began to sink in slowly. Whatever had attacked, it had not come from Earth. People's emotions were raw. Fear and grief intertwined with disbelief and anger. In schools, children asked why someone would do such a thing. In offices, coworkers whispered their own theories. In homes, families huddled around televisions, trying to understand how their world could suddenly seem so fragile. It was the first time in modern history that humanity felt collectively, universally vulnerable, facing something completely unknown. Meanwhile, journalists worked tirelessly to document the moment, interviewing witnesses, showing footage, and trying to capture the scale of the event. Personal stories emerged: aides who had ducked under tables, journalists who had broadcast live during the incident, security guards who had tried to protect the leader. Each story was heartbreaking, humanizing the tragedy, and reminding everyone watching that this was not just political. It was deeply personal for those involved. In the hours and days that followed, the global conversation shifted from shock to investigation. Countries that had long been rivals shared intelligence. Emergency summits were held, sometimes virtually, to coordinate a response. Analysts attempted to understand the technology, the energy signature, and the method used to carry out such a precise act. Every effort reinforced the same unsettling conclusion: the world had been observed, and someone or something had the capability to strike at the heart of power silently and without warning. People's thoughts turned to survival. Civil defense organizations saw an increase in membership. Governments issued statements urging calm. But the underlying message was clear: the planet had been made aware of a presence beyond itself. Scientists debated the implications for human society, politics, and security. Philosophers, religious leaders, and cultural commentators discussed what it meant to be human in a universe where humans were no longer alone. As the sun set over cities and towns around the world, the reality was undeniable. Life as it had been known would never be the same. The leader's assassination had not only been a direct attack, but a signal. Humanity was no longer isolated. And the first shock of realization was sinking into every mind on Earth. In the quiet moments of the night, people wondered, who had done this? Why? And what would come next? Fear mingled with a strange sense of determination. For the first time, the world understood the fragility of human existence and the scale of the universe. And for the first time it realized that survival might require unprecedented unity, courage, and action. In homes, offices, streets, and public squares, the world held its collective breath. A silent question hung in the air. If this had been possible, what else could be out there watching, waiting, or preparing to act? Humanity had crossed a threshold, moving from ignorance to awareness, from routine to unprecedented crises. And all eyes turned skyward, searching, hoping, fearing, and realizing that from this moment on, nothing would be ordinary again. In the days after the assassination, the world was a place of tension and confusion. Governments moved quickly, trying to calm citizens and secure their borders, but the truth could not be hidden. Evidence of the attack was everywhere. Video footage, eyewitness accounts, satellite data, every detail pointed to something beyond Earth, something no human had created. Scientists and military experts spent long hours analyzing the energy signatures, the trajectory, and the technology used. Each analysis brought the same conclusion. The attack had come from somewhere else, from a force far more advanced than humanity. At first, people struggled to believe it. How could something so powerful exist and strike without warning? Some dismissed it as an elaborate hoax or a secret military experiment gone wrong. Others were terrified, imagining fleets of alien ships hovering just beyond the atmosphere. Across the globe, news channels replayed the incident endlessly. Experts discussed theories on airwaves, in newspapers, and online forums. The conversation shifted from national security to the possibility of life beyond Earth. The public felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and disbelief. In labs and offices, scientists worked around the clock. Satellites were reprogrammed to track anomalies in the sky. Astronomers scanned the skies for unusual movement. Physicists tried to understand the energy readings captured during the attack. Engineers examined every aspect of communications and military defense systems. Nothing matched known human technology. The realization that Earth had been watched, studied, and targeted sent waves of unease through every community. People began to understand that their world was no longer alone. Governments struggled to respond. Leaders debated how much to reveal and how much to conceal. Some insisted on total transparency, fearing public panic, while others feared that revealing the truth would spark global chaos. Emergency meetings were held in secret bunkers. Intelligence agencies shared information across borders, even with historical rivals, in an unprecedented act of cooperation. The world had never felt so fragile and yet so united. Citizens reacted in ways that were both predictable and surprising. Fear prompted some to stockpile food, water, and supplies. Others turned to community centers, seeking answers and reassurance from leaders, neighbors, or religious figures. Schools held emergency assemblies, explaining the events as best they could. Families spoke late into the night about what it meant to live in a world where the sky was no longer just a distant blue, but a place of unknown threats. Social media amplified the fear and curiosity. Videos and images were shared millions of times within hours. Some posts spread misinformation, claiming sightings of alien crafts or secret government plans. Others offered detailed analyses of the energy signatures. With amateur scientists trying to make sense of what experts had only just begun to understand, online communities debated, argued, and sometimes comforted each other. But the constant stream of information made it clear that the world was changing. Journalists worked tirelessly to cover the unfolding story. They interviewed eyewitnesses, experts, and officials, trying to create a record of what had happened. In the middle of fear and confusion, personal stories emerged that humanized the tragedy. A security guard recalled the last moments before the strike, describing the calm and the sudden flash of light. An aide spoke of trying to protect the leader, their courage, and their despair. Each story reminded the world that the event was not just political, it was deeply personal for those directly involved. Military analysts pored over every detail, trying to understand if humanity could defend itself. They simulated scenarios, calculated trajectories, and studied the attack pattern. They concluded that while the technology was far beyond anything on Earth, the attackers had been precise, perhaps sending a message rather than intending mass destruction. This raised questions about intent. Were they observing, warning, or preparing for something larger? The uncertainty only added to global anxiety. Meanwhile, ordinary people felt the change in their daily lives. Airlines faced delays due to security alerts. City streets saw increased police presence. Offices and government buildings implemented new security protocols. Even routine activities carried a weight of caution. People became more aware of the sky above, of sounds they might have ignored before, of unusual objects or lights. It was a shift in perspective, subtle at first, but profound. Humanity had entered a new chapter. No one knew what came next. Religious and cultural leaders spoke to calm the world, interpreting the event in ways that reflected their teachings. Some saw it as a test of faith, others as a warning, and others as proof of the vastness of creation. These messages helped communities cope, even if they could not explain the reality of the threat. Across cities and countries, gatherings and discussions helped people feel less isolated in their fear. Humanity, despite differences, was searching for common understanding. Scientists and engineers also saw an opportunity. The attack, while terrifying, revealed advanced technology that could be studied. Teams collaborated internationally, sharing data in ways previously considered impossible. Universities, space agencies, private companies worked on simulations and theoretical models, imagining what kind of civilization could create such a weapon. The effort was monumental, but it also sparked hope that humanity could learn, adapt, and maybe even defend itself. Governments announced official investigations. Special committees were formed to review all available evidence. Classified documents were declassified as much as possible to provide transparency. While many details remained secret, the public was informed that the threat was real, the attacker unknown, and that preparations were underway to understand and respond. This partial transparency helped reduce panic. Anxiety remained high. Families shared stories about their own fears and hopes. Children asked questions that adults struggled to answer. Parents spoke honestly, admitting they didn't know the full truth, but emphasizing the importance of staying calm and sticking together. Communities organized meetings and watch groups, trying to create a sense of control in a world suddenly full of uncertainty. It was a human reaction, to come together when faced with the unknown, to protect and support each other. As the days passed, the world began to grasp the scale of the event. The assassination was not just an attack on one leader, it was a signal to all of humanity. The implications were enormous. If one human could be struck with such precision and ease, what did that mean for the rest of the planet? This question prompted unprecedented cooperation between countries. A shared understanding that survival might require putting aside differences and working together as a species. Global leaders gave speeches, urging calm, unity, and vigilance. They acknowledged fear, but also emphasized resilience and ingenuity. Citizens were encouraged to stay informed, but to avoid panic and speculation. News reports highlighted human stories, scientific breakthroughs, and coordinated efforts to understand the unknown. Across the globe, people began to accept that life had changed, and that humanity must adapt to a new reality. For scientists, the event was both a warning and an opportunity. Teams studied patterns, signals, and energy readings, trying to develop defense strategies. Engineers considered space-based solutions, artificial intelligence systems, and advanced surveillance technologies. Every discovery was shared internationally, reinforcing the need for cooperation and shared knowledge. Humanity's collective intelligence became its greatest tool in the face of uncertainty. In the private moments, people reflected on their place in the universe. Many had never considered that humans might not be alone, but now it was undeniable. The stars no longer seemed distant or unreachable. They were places of possibility, danger, and unknown intelligence. Families looked up at the night sky, feeling awe, fear, and wonder all at once. Children imagined civilizations beyond Earth, and adults considered strategies to protect life on the planet in workplaces. Schools and homes, conversations shifted. People debated science, philosophy, and survival. Social gatherings often included discussions about the event, the technology, and what it meant for the future. The world had become a single, connected stage, and everyone felt its weight. Humanity had moved from ignorance to awareness, and that awareness brought responsibility. The days after the assassination were marked by reflection, investigation, and the first steps toward global unity in the face of an unknown threat. By the end of the week, the initial shock had begun to settle into a quiet determination. People understood that fear alone would not protect them. They needed knowledge, cooperation, and action. Scientists, governments, and citizens all realized that the event was a turning point. A moment when humanity collectively understood its vulnerability and its potential. The assassination of one leader had triggered a response that would define a new era. It was no longer just about politics or territory, it was about survival, understanding, and preparation for a future in which Earth was no longer alone. The world had shifted in a way that no one could have imagined. The assassination of the leader had shaken every country, every city, and every person. Yet, it was not just the loss of a leader that changed the world, it was the realization that humanity faced something completely unknown. Governments were no longer thinking only about trade deals, elections, or military rivalries. Their focus had shifted to survival, to understanding, and to preparing for something that could not be predicted. Nations reacted differently. Some tried to calm their citizens, emphasizing stability, unity, and the importance of staying calm. Others reacted with fear, mobilizing military forces and enforcing emergency protocols. Cities increased security, airports were monitored more closely, communication systems were watched for any unusual activity. Ordinary people noticed the change immediately. Streets felt different, quieter in some places, more tense in others. Families huddled in living rooms discussing what they should do, while children asked questions adults could not answer. International cooperation began to take shape, but it was not easy. Countries that had long been rivals now had to share intelligence, satellite data, and scientific findings. Meetings were held in secret, agreements signed behind closed doors. For the first time, leaders spoke not just of national interest, but of global survival. Yet even with cooperation, fear lingered. Humanity had never faced a threat that could strike silently from the sky. That uncertainty was unsettling. People's daily lives were affected in unexpected ways. Schools began to teach children not only about science and history, but also about safety measures and emergency preparedness. Offices implemented strict security checks. Families stocked supplies in case of emergencies. Citizens were encouraged to remain calm but also to remain alert. Every unusual sight in the sky, every strange sound, became a cause for speculation. The ordinary had become extraordinary. People had to adapt quickly. Social media became a hub for discussion, debate, and sometimes panic. Videos of the assassination were replayed endlessly, analyzed frame by frame. Some users speculated about alien technology, while others criticized governments for not acting fast enough. Information spread faster than ever, both accurate and false. In a way, social media reflected the global mood, curiosity mixed with fear, hope intertwined with despair. Despite the chaos, these platforms also allowed people to share experiences, seek advice, and find a sense of community. Scientists continued their tireless work. They studied the energy signatures, tested theories about the technology used, and searched for ways to detect similar threats in the future. Their work required collaboration across borders and disciplines. Physicists, engineers, and computer scientists shared findings with colleagues worldwide. The work was exhausting, challenging, and sometimes frustrating, but it also inspired hope. If humans could understand this technology, perhaps they could defend against it. In homes, people discussed what they saw and heard. Families shared fears and hopes late into the night. Some parents admitted they did not know what the future held, but emphasized the importance of staying together and supporting each other. Friends discussed contingency plans, potential safe zones, and emergency communication strategies. The collective awareness of vulnerability had transformed communities. People realized that survival was not just about governments or armies, but about human connection and cooperation. Journalists continued to document events, focusing on the human stories. Eyewitnesses shared their accounts of the assassination, capturing the fear, confusion, and courage of that moment. Security personnel described their attempts to protect the leader, their frustration, and their sorrow. Ordinary citizens shared how their lives had changed since the event. Each story reminded the world that this was not an abstract crisis. It was deeply human, affecting real lives in profound ways. Military leaders worked to prepare for the unknown. They simulated attacks, created emergency protocols, and trained personnel in rapid response. New technologies were explored, including satellites, sensors, and artificial intelligence systems. The goal was not to provoke conflict, but to defend humanity against something that could strike without warning. For the first time in history, countries worked together not to conquer, but to protect life on the planet. Meanwhile, ordinary people were noticing changes in their environment. Increased surveillance, more emergency drills, and unusual activity in cities reminded them that the world was no longer as safe as it once felt. People adapted in small ways, carrying emergency supplies, monitoring news reports, and watching the skies more carefully. Even in everyday routines, there was a new awareness that life could change in an instant. Religious leaders, philosophers, and cultural thinkers tried to provide guidance. They spoke of unity, resilience, and hope. Communities gathered to reflect, pray, and discuss what it meant to live in a world where the unknown could strike at any moment. These gatherings offered comfort, helping people process fear and uncertainty. Humanity was learning to face the unimaginable together, and in doing so, it began to develop a collective resilience. The loss of the leader created a political vacuum, but it also inspired global reflection. Citizens realized that governments could not protect them from everything, and that their own knowledge, cooperation, and courage were equally important. Grassroots organizations and community groups became more active, educating citizens about safety, emergency procedures, and scientific developments. Humanity began to understand that survival required both leadership and participation from everyone. Scientists and engineers worked day, night, to understand what had attacked the leader. They examined debris, analyzed energy readings, and simulated possible scenarios. Their research was groundbreaking and unprecedented, challenging everything humanity thought it knew about technology and the universe. Every discovery brought questions as well as answers. What kind of civilization could create such a device? Were they observing Earth, warning it, or preparing for something larger? The questions were daunting, but they drove humanity to learn, adapt, and innovate. Global leaders held emergency sessions to coordinate a response. Military, scientific, and intelligence officials shared data and recommendations. Decisions were made quickly, often under immense pressure. The goal was clear: prepare for the unknown, protect citizens, and ensure that Earth could respond effectively if attacked again. For the first time in history, the planet acted as a single entity, united by a threat that no country could face alone. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens experienced a mix of emotions. Some felt paralyzed by fear, while others felt determined to adapt and survive. Communities organized workshops on emergency preparedness. Schools held special sessions, and families created plans for every possible scenario. Even in fear, people found ways to come together, helping each other cope with uncertainty and danger. Social media continued to amplify global awareness. Citizens shared observations, theories, and personal experiences. Some posts warned of potential dangers, while others offered encouragement and hope. The exchange of information created a global dialogue, helping people feel connected despite fear and uncertainty. Humanity was learning to navigate a new reality, where information, collaboration, and vigilance were essential for survival. At the same time, journalists highlighted stories of courage and resilience. Eyewitnesses recounted moments of bravery during the assassination. Security personnel shared how they tried to protect the leader. Ordinary citizens described acts of kindness and support during times of fear. These stories reminded the world that even in the face of the unimaginable, humanity could act with courage, compassion, and unity. The realization that the assassination was not just a political act, but a message to all of humanity changed the way governments and citizens thought about security. People began to focus on cooperation, not conflict. Emergency preparedness, scientific research, and community resilience became priorities. Humanity understood that survival depended on working together, sharing knowledge, and being ready for anything. As weeks passed, the initial shock of the events slowly gave way to action. Citizens, scientists, and leaders understood that the world had changed forever. Fear remained, but it was accompanied by determination, ingenuity, and a sense of shared responsibility. Humanity was no longer isolated. It had entered a new era where cooperation, knowledge, and courage were more important than ever. The assassination had been a devastating event, but it had also awakened a global awareness, a sense of unity, and a readiness to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The first step toward humanity's response began quietly but deliberately. Scientists and military leaders worked side by side, sharing every detail they had collected since the assassination. They studied energy readings, satellite images, and other data that could reveal how the attack had been carried out. Every observation was analyzed, every anomaly investigated, and every possibility considered. The goal was clear: to understand the technology and capabilities of the unknown attacker, and to find a way to respond effectively. In command centers around the world, analysts monitored the skies constantly. Satellites scanned for any unusual movement, while ground-based sensors watched for signs of energy or propulsion that humans could not recognize. Teams of engineers designed new detection systems, capable of identifying even the most subtle signs of extraterrestrial activity. It was a global effort, unprecedented in history. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel collaborated across borders. Setting aside political differences for the sake of survival, the public watched closely. With a mix of fear and fascination, news channels reported progress, showing new technologies being deployed, simulations being run, and emergency drills being conducted. Citizens learned that humanity had entered a new era where the unknown could not be ignored. Families discussed the plans in their homes, imagining what it might mean to defend Earth from forces far beyond human experience. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful, as people realized that action was being taken. Military forces began to prepare for direct action, although cautiously. They knew that any engagement with an unknown and advanced attacker carried enormous risk. Nevertheless, joint operations were planned to test humanity's ability to respond. Satellites equipped with experimental systems were launched into orbit. Electromagnetic and laser technologies were tested for precision and safety. AI-driven surveillance networks were activated to track objects in space that could pose a threat. It was a time of preparation, experimentation, and careful execution. Communication and coordination became crucial. Nations that had long been rivals shared real-time intelligence, coordinating plans for observation, detection, and potential defense. Emergency protocols were established for cities, military bases, and critical infrastructure. Citizens were encouraged to stay calm, but informed, to understand that humanity was taking steps to protect itself. Schools, workplaces, and households began to practice emergency drills, not out of panic, but as part of a new awareness. In the midst of preparation, a breakthrough occurred. A satellite detected an unusual energy signature near the moon. It moved in a pattern that suggested surveillance or observation rather than direct attack. Analysts studied the readings, comparing them with the data from the assassination. The similarities were striking. Humanity now had evidence that the unknown force was not only observing Earth, but doing so intentionally. This discovery prompted immediate action. Global councils convened emergency meetings. Military leaders proposed a controlled strike using experimental technology, designed to disable the object without provoking a larger attack. Engineers calculated trajectories, energy outputs, and potential consequences. Scientists debated the risks, emphasizing precision and caution. Every calculation was double-checked, every scenario simulated. Humanity was about to take its first step toward defending itself, and every detail mattered. The strike was carried out carefully. A combination of AI guidance, electromagnetic pulses, and precision targeting disabled the object in orbit. Observers held their breath as the operation unfolded. There was no explosion, no catastrophic failure, just a sudden disappearance of the unknown object. Satellites and sensors confirmed the results. Humanity had struck back, not recklessly, but with intelligence, precision, and coordination. The message was clear. Earth was no longer passive. Across the world, citizens followed the operation closely. News broadcasts showed the scientists and military personnel monitoring the strike. Families watched from their homes, holding hands, feeling a sense of relief mixed with awe. Children asked questions about what had happened, while adults discussed the significance of the event. Humanity had proven that it could respond even to forces far beyond its previous experience. The event became a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and unity. Military leaders emphasized that the strike was a warning, not a provocation. The unknown force had been observed, and Earth had responded with precision and caution. Plans were made for additional monitoring and potential defensive measures, but the approach remained deliberate. Humanity understood that it could not act recklessly, but it could act wisely and together. The strategy focused on preparation, observation, and measured response rather than aggression. In the following weeks, the global effort expanded. Scientists refined detection systems, improving sensitivity and coverage. Engineers designed additional safeguards while military units conducted drills to ensure readiness. Citizens were informed regularly, learning about the technologies and strategies being developed. The world had shifted from fear to active preparation, with a sense of shared purpose that transcended national borders. Journalists continued to document the human stories behind the effort. They reported on engineers working through the night, scientists collaborating across continents, and soldiers training for scenarios they had never imagined. Families shared personal experiences of fear and hope, highlighting the human element of the global response. The assassination and subsequent action had transformed not only governments, but communities and individuals as well. Social media reflected both excitement and caution. Citizens shared updates, personal observations, and questions. Experts provided analysis and explanations, helping people understand the complexities of the operation. Public awareness and engagement grew, reinforcing the sense that survival required collective effort. Humanity was learning to act as a single species, united by knowledge, coordination, and the desire to protect life on Earth. Schools, workplaces, and community organizations incorporated lessons from the response into their daily routines. Emergency preparedness, scientific education, and cooperation became central themes. Citizens learned to work together, to think critically, and to stay informed. The experience fostered a sense of resilience, adaptability, and shared responsibility. Humanity had moved from passive observation to deliberate action. At the same time, philosophical and cultural reflections emerged. Leaders, thinkers, and spiritual guides discussed what it meant to take the first step in defending the planet. Humanity had crossed a threshold, moving from vulnerability to agency. The act of striking back was not just military, it was symbolic, demonstrating intelligence, cooperation, and courage. Citizens reflected on their role in this new era, realizing that survival required awareness, participation, and unity. The world had changed. But humanity was learning to adapt. The first strike against the unknown object was a small but significant step. It demonstrated that Earth could observe, respond, and protect itself without panic or chaos. It also emphasized the importance of preparation, knowledge, and global cooperation. Citizens, scientists, and leaders alike understood that this was only the beginning. The unknown threat remained, but humanity had shown that it could act with intelligence, precision, and resilience. Communities around the world began to embrace a new mindset. People understood that survival required collective effort, careful observation, and informed action. Families practiced emergency drills, schools incorporated scientific education, and citizens stayed engaged with global developments. The world had entered a new era, where vigilance, cooperation, and readiness were essential. Humanity had struck back, but the work was far from over. In the months that followed, humanity continued to strengthen its defenses. Satellite networks expanded, detection systems improved, and emergency protocols became standard practice. Scientists explored new technologies, engineers designed innovative solutions, and military units prepared for a range of scenarios. Citizens remained informed and engaged, understanding that their participation was part of the collective effort. Humanity had moved from fear to agency, from observation to action, and from isolation to global cooperation. The first strike against the unknown object became a defining moment. It showed that humans could respond intelligently, deliberately, and with precision. It also reminded everyone that survival required unity, knowledge, and courage. Humanity had taken its first step into a new era, one where the planet could no longer ignore the unknown. Citizens, leaders, and scientists alike realized that the future depended on awareness, preparation, and the willingness to act together. The story of the strike spread worldwide, inspiring hope and determination. People discussed the event in homes, schools, and workplaces, reflecting on what it meant for the future. Citizens understood that they were part of a global effort and that every contribution mattered. The first strike had demonstrated that humanity could respond to even the most advanced and unknown threats. It was a moment of resilience, intelligence, and unity, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Earth after the successful first strike against the unknown object. Humanity began to understand the significance of its actions. The event was more than a military success. It was a turning point in history. People across the globe felt a mix of relief and awe. For the first time, Earth had acted as a single entity, demonstrating intelligence, coordination, and resilience. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer passive. The planet had shown that it could observe, respond, and defend itself when necessary. Governments continued to collaborate, sharing intelligence and technological innovations. New international councils were formed to oversee planetary defense, uniting scientists, military leaders, engineers, and policymakers from every country. The focus was not on conflict between nations, but on the survival of humanity as a whole. Decisions were made collectively, and resources were pooled to strengthen Earth's defenses. The assassination and subsequent response had redefined the meaning of global cooperation. Citizens felt a new sense of responsibility. Schools taught students about scientific observation, emergency preparedness, and critical thinking. Families discussed plans for safety and survival, while communities organized workshops on resilience and cooperation. People became more aware of their surroundings and more engaged with the world around them. The experience had taught humanity that survival was not only about leadership or military power, but about knowledge, unity, and the ability to act wisely. Social media played a role in shaping global awareness. Information about defense strategies, scientific breakthroughs, and emergency protocols was shared widely. Experts provided explanations to help the public understand complex technological and scientific concepts. Citizens asked questions, discussed possibilities, and supported each other. The exchange of information created a sense of global connection and participation, reinforcing the idea that survival required collective effort.